All right, so it looks like we are live. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Awakening Consciousness with Asher and Jesse. Today, it's just Asher. Jesse is not available today, but we have a special guest, Rhys. He is the founder of Youth for Freedom. He's very passionate about bringing freedom and the sort of freedom mindset to young people. And we're going to be talking about really sort of the two worlds that are being formed. We've mentioned many times on this show about, the split of society, the one society going along with, all the narratives and the trickery at play, and they're very excited to connect themselves to the cloud and all their devices and all that stuff. And then we have a more human way of living, and we're going to find out from Rhys that he is involved in helping to build that. There's many people around the world helping to build the new world, and we're going to hear from him what he's doing and maybe how we can help. So welcome, Rhys, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Asher. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to you. And yeah, I'm really excited about sharing part of our mission in Youth for Freedom, and also particularly excited, of course, because you're part of this amazing truth initiative, shall we say, relating to Dr. Thomas Cowan. And I'm really excited to speak about how we can build this new world, and hopefully this world will be a place where youth are able to come forward with their idealistic and passionate mindset and be guided by the wisdom of those who have more life experience of them, but to really find that they do have a place in this world. So yes, looking forward to it.
Awesome. So if we can back up a little bit and sort of talk us about where you were in terms of your mindset. Because I can imagine what sort of prompted the shift and prompted the building of this, the whole, craziness that's gone on the last year. But sort of where were you from your mindset perspective before the whole Corona nonsense? And then talk to us about the shift, and then how and why you started Youth for Freedom.
Okay, yes. So before lockdown, so before March 2020 in Great Britain, I was very much an in-betweener, I would say. On the one hand, my dad had helped me begin thinking more independently and more rationally about issues like climate change, and is it man-made or are natural factors the main cause? And I'd also begun sort of deciding my stance to the whole woke culture, which permeates the university through and through. And at this stage, I was just coming out of my third year. But I was an in-betweener because, well, only now looking back can I say that, because I realized there was a whole host of topics that I'd absolutely never heard of. So, for example, like common law and the legal system, but also just the depth of corruption in the banking system, for example. I'm still only touching the surface, so I'm not going to act as if I'm an expert on these matters, but certainly I can realize that at the time, even though I thought I was sort of waking up, in university and seeing the woke culture for what it was, this kind of false morality, shall we say, there was so much for me to find out. And yeah, it's interesting you pointed towards this building the new world out of more of a kind of human place, because that's really actually where Youth for Freedom began for me. Although I did have some of these sort of perspectives and opinions on the woke culture, and then also on the fact that lockdowns were causing a lot of social isolation and not necessarily doing anything actually good for us, and that at the very least the onus was on the scientists to prove to us that the lockdowns were actually helping, because to our direct experience, nothing they were proposing as all these methods to resolve this issue, COVID, were actually doing anything. And so I was experiencing direct firsthand this sort of social isolation, and I thought I can't be the only one, and particularly amongst young people, I know that it's a kind of, I mean, it's for us all, isn't it? It's the most basic kind of human need to have companionship with those of like mind. So that was the main feeling that actually motivated me in the first place to reach out to gather young people together, was this idea of let's form a social circle with those who are kind of interested in the freedom and truth values, because I couldn't bridge to these other people who are so sort of dogmatic in their mindset. And I was very open, like I would have said that at the beginning, I was open to the fact that maybe the government were right in locking down and things like that. But I just wanted to at least have a proper in-depth discussion about, a rational discussion, and I couldn't have that in the outer world. The universities would just shut it down. And so I thought, I've got to create something myself, essentially. And so really I was owning the spark, though, because it was just about reaching out, gathering this group of young people, and then sort of brainstorming how we're going to build this, essentially.
Mhm. And so where are you in the world? Like, are you, I know you're in the UK, but are you like city UK, country UK?
Yeah, so I'm a country man.
Okay.
Yeah, we live on the edge of the Cotswolds. So I very much appreciate sort of nature, and I suppose that's why I'm also even more adverse to the idea of building a new world order based on sort of digital currencies. Everything digital. Sort of almost living our lives in this kind of matrix.
Mhm.
Um, and I think many people and any young people out there who are sort of still on the fence about what's going on, whether to join the freedom and truth movement or stick with the mainstream narrative, who might think that we're being dramatic when we speak about a matrix that they're trying to create. We just need to sort of refer them to what Facebook are trying to create with the metaverse, and
Yeah.
all these things are actually out there as information in the public domain. It's just about, I mean, that's part of our mission as Youth for Freedom, is to try and get the facts, to share those with other people in our the wider public, let's say, and say, do you really want this kind of world based on living in a kind of purely digitalized society?
Mhm.
It sounds pretty dystopian to me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And do you, what's kind of the mindset of your peers over there? Are you mentioned the woke culture in universities. Would you have a sense of like the percentage of people who are going along and bought into the narrative versus the ones who had questioned it? And has that changed over time as the as time has gone on, and lockdowns and adding and removing measures and all that stuff?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I mean, it can be the issue, can't it, if you're involved in a movement that you end up trapped in an echo chamber. Um, so I definitely have a biased perspective and would say that the numbers have definitely increased in my immediate circle. That I have increase in terms of the freedom and truth movement.
Mhm.
I have a lot more friends in that now. Um, it's very hard to say, but I definitely have witnessed kind of this ebb and flow in my immediate circle of people's sort of reaction to the measures, and a slow kind of realization on people's parts that there was actually a lot of madness going on in government, and of course the party scandal with Boris Johnson, if you heard about that.
Mm,
um,
I have
Certainly.
not. Maybe you could go into a little bit more detail about that.
Yeah, surely. I mean, just to briefly summarize, um, now, back in, I think it was May 2021, if I'm right in thinking, or maybe been 2020, the government decided to um, host a party for themselves whilst they were telling all of us to um, wear masks, stay at home, and all the rest of the crap.
Mhm.
Um, and just shows just complete contempt for the British public, basically.
Yeah, rules for thee, not for me. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I did hear
And
about one person, maybe he was like the health minister or something like that. He was seeing his mistress on the side.
mm,
And so that's a no-no on multiple accounts. Obviously
mhm.
they're engaging in activities that, you know, that would make it less fun if you were wearing a mask. And so that was a whole thing. I did hear about that. But
Mm.
so it sounds like people are waking up a little bit, I guess, in increasing numbers. So would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I definitely want to be positive and say that, but I think if I'm also to be fully honest, I think I have to say I don't quite know.
Mhm.
It's quite hard to judge, and I think obviously that's been a characteristic of this whole situation, the amount of doubt that we've had to suffer because the mainstream media wouldn't report if more people are waking up. It's going to be
Right. Yeah.
pushed under the covers.
No, they wouldn't report on their own irrelevance I wouldn't expect them to issue a new report on that. But
Mm,
so yeah, I mean, in my life, I can definitely see that more and more people are waking up, and I went through my awakening period, a little over a decade at this point now.
mm.
And so yeah, so it's so you describe yourself as sort of like half awake, and then the pandemic sort of put you over the top. And so talk to
Mhm.
me about starting the organization, and how you started it, why you started it, and where it is now.
Sure, yeah. So as I said, it began in actually I think it was summer 2020, going into the autumn, facing a winter of lockdowns and feeling very isolated, um, thinking there's got to be other young people feeling the same way as me, and why don't we just get together and create something? And it really was kind of as open as that in a way. Obviously, we I mean, this has sort of developed out of the group, but definitely at the heart of it was we're gathering around these common values of the freedom and truth movement. That's the basis for our social circle, if you like. But
Mhm.
beyond that, it was very open because we acknowledge everyone's individuals and they may have something to teach us. Our values may need to be adjusted as we make sort of friendships with each other, as we receive more information that we haven't heard. And so there can't really be a sort of rigid set of values that we say, well, a completely rigid set of values. There's the general values like we believe in bodily freedom, for example. You get to choose what you put in your body. Um, and we have this value of, well, at least I do have this strong value of truth that I feel we must endeavour to get to the bottom of key matters like um, the actual, does the virus actually exist, for example, like Thomas Cowan has gone into. Um, so yeah, and I think that the characteristic of the people that we reached out to were that many of these had felt disenfranchised with the system that they've been living in, whether that had been in the education system or even in their work. Some of our members had been ostracized for their views, or at the very least were kind of at work were kind of one in 1,000, or that's how it
Mhm.
felt to them. So this was a kind of safe haven for those people to come together, express their views freely, without hindrance, not necessarily agree on everything, but have these in-depth research discussions, and that has grown into sort of what the individuals who've come into the group have brought themselves, because that's kind of the central value of the group in a way, is that the individuals can bring their own initiatives as to what they see appropriate for the current situation we're in. So there was a period when we were looking into common law, for example,
Mhm.
having this question: is this kind of the resolution to the state we're in as a society? Because if you're able to take back your own sovereignty, in reality, the government can do nothing unless you consent. But of course, we came up and faced the issues with that, which is you can sort of scream and shout, "I don't consent," but potentially they might take you away with force. And so we've sort of been broadening our horizons, as it were, together.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it's still very much developing. We've had a lot of social events to sort of help the group bond. And I'm speaking particularly locally, so I probably should say that Youth for Freedom is sort of a decentralized network of groups, is what I'd say. So anyone can start a Youth for Freedom anywhere. Someone could start it in America. We'd be thrilled about that. Um, and obviously, we offer, as coordinators, we offer support for people to set up their own group. We've got one in London, Yorkshire, and the south of England as well. Um, and yeah, I think because it's so simple at the basis that it's firstly coming together, and secondly with these common values, and then thirdly asking this question: what do we want to do together? Do we want to do research, or do we want to actually start creating a new world? It's quite open ended and gives the space for the youth to breathe, as it were, and do what they would like to with it. And I think our vision for the future is, as you were saying about creating this new world, can we contribute somehow to forming communities which are, let's just say, the opposite of the new world order? Obviously, we have to define what they're going to be, and that's a big question that's living with me at the moment. What could be the basis? What could be the basis for these communities? Could it be common law? Could it be can it be religion? Can it be spirituality? Yes, and so I'd love to speak about that more.
Yeah. So right. So sounds like you have multiple groups in different locations, a decentralized way of getting together. I think that's a great idea, and it really goes to what we talked about on the show a lot, and that is, getting together with people of like mind to build a life that is worth living. A free and inspired life to add your piece to the world.
Mm.
um so I think that's great that you've put together a platform for people to do that. um how did it go in the beginning? Where was there resistance to this? How was it embraced by your peers?
Mm. Yeah, well, interestingly, I think I only really had one friend who I'd had a bit of beef with, shall we say? Um, and in the end, unfortunately, he's not my friend anymore. Just because it was, we found this actually that, and I think this is a common experience amongst the freedom movement, that with your old friend, shall we say, that as much as you might try and bridge the divide, if you like, to them, try and have an open discussion about what's going on, often um, it, there's really a complete split in people, that they get very emotional when speaking about whether, for example, whether the COVID virus exists, or another matter like that. And um, most people haven't got a strong enough. I didn't have a strong enough relationship with this particular person to hold together from that sort of difference in view. And really with him, it was just because he wouldn't even speak about it with me. Basically, it was that bad. Um, and I know with other people that they're sort of being fearful with even speaking about it with anyone who is not who's on the other side, shall we say? So, but amongst those who have joined us, it's been a really really positive response. We've It's sort of one of those classic things where you get these testimonials, and sometimes it can be quite, on the one hand, it can be kind of cringy, but on the other, actually, I think it's really meaningful to hear how people have been profoundly impacted by Youth for Freedom. And a lot of our members have said how much it's changed their lives in a way, um, to just have people to speak about their views on what's going on in the world. Because if you are seeing a sort of societal collapse, and no one is screaming and shouting, and no one's speaking about it, it's like probably the worst kind of nightmare, isn't it? You're literally helpless. Whereas when you come together with other people and you can actually speak through one issue at a time and collaborate, and also at the same time, as you say, kind of make life worth living, shall we say, in how you're being with each other, having fun and enjoying life too, it makes a tremendous difference.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that, your experience with your friend is definitely very common these days. I hear stories all the time of, family members not speaking to each other, or, close friends no longer being friends anymore because of, differences of opinion as to what's
Mm,
going on. One of
mm,
the things that's always really, I wonder why. Like, why do people care so much? Why do people care that it's not care so much, but like care that it has to be this outcome or this conclusion?
mm,
Why do people have the mindset of like, or why don't people have the mindset is like, okay, so they say that there's something going on. Well, I don't have a dog in this fight. I don't care if it's a virus or not, or if this,
mm,
or if it's this, or if it's that. I just care about what the truth is. And it boggles my mind as to why people don't have that mindset or thought process when they go about just living their lives. Like, why do they care that there's a virus? And
mm.
so it sounds like you weren't able to bridge that gap with your friend, which is unfortunate. But maybe you did say you had some powerful testimonials, let's say from members. Could you share some of the stories that some of the success stories that you've had?
Yeah, yeah, sure thing. So, I mean, we do have some on our website, which I should say is youthforfreedom.co.uk. Um, that's definitely something, in terms of testimonials, something that we could update a lot by now. We've had a lot more members join since we sort of published those.
Hmm.
And yeah, so the website is where you can join our groups, or create your own, and we can add the Telegram link or whatever platform you want to use onto our page. Um, we also have a donation page just to help, um, primarily to help us spend more time basically on building Youth for Freedom, reach out, and other visions that we have, which we sort of explain on the website. So yeah, if I just go to the testimonials, so this was Ollie. He said, "I came to Youth for Freedom not necessarily thinking that everyone will have the same opinions as me, but I can knowing that as a group we allow full and diverse conversations without ridicule. The last 18 months I've felt that I have had to tiptoe around people and keep my thoughts and feelings to myself. Youth for Freedom gives me that breath of fresh air where I know I have the opportunity to speak freely, knowing that I won't be met with hostility and constant name calling.
Hmm.
It also gives me hope that the younger generations have not succumbed to social pressures. We still have freedom of thought and are willing to help spread this further and help others." So that's a great one. I think, it's true. It really it turns into one of those sort of, when you try and have these open discussions, as you say, about what is the truth of what's going on. Forget what I have this forget my petty opinions, let's just say, and let's get the wider perspective. You do often end up getting called names, as I was saying. It gets hostile pretty quickly.
Hmm.
So yeah, sorry, go on.
No, yeah, and it seems like the culture, and maybe you could speak more to this because you've been in school more recently than I have, and it really wasn't like this when I was in school. I graduated college in 2007, so I'm a little bit older than you. But yeah, could you speak to sort of the woke culture that is going on these days, and you know maybe the pressure to comply or the pressure to conform your opinions to a group or to the opinions of the majority? What is that like these days?
Hmm. Yeah, so I mean, for me, it was now a year and a bit since I graduated. So I'm sort of just going back in the memory bank, as it were, to university. Um, I mean, I remember one of the core experiences of university was, for me, was the emptiness of the work culture. How, in a way, it was
Hmm.
claiming to be a new morality. And this is particularly
Hmm.
prominent in relation to kind of sexism and racism, for example. they appear to be standing against all that, and yet, of course, and I would say, like, I'm with them on that if that's their value. But when you actually sort of dug a bit deeper, you found this profound emptiness where actually they don't really care so much about racism and sexism. It's more about having a sort of almost ideal, and actually it's kind of pure Marxism. It's this idea that you can kind of right wrongs of the past for people who suffered in the way distant past, that in relation to, for example, women's suffrage and black people being enslaved, for example, that you can right those wrongs right here and now,
Yeah.
without consideration of the individual at all.
Mm-hmm.
And while they would be going around and actually saying that, for example, I, just because I'm white, am privileged somehow without me knowing it, and so of course there's nothing I can do about it if I'm not conscious. So they're telling me that I'm completely helpless to my own awful, deep racism, and I just kind of came to that experience of, these are just kind of all these ideas that the youth are kind of being bombarded with and taking up, because they have a kind of an emptiness inside of them, and they want some sort of morality, and this kind of seems quite easy, and you can virtue signal with it till the cows come home, if you like, and it's not actually got any substance to it. So I don't know if that expresses it very well, because it was a while ago, and I have to say I did try and avoid the types of people who really had this kind of hardcore wokeness, if you like, because a lot of people kind of just do it just so that for an easy life, if you know what I mean. So you can sort of still build a friendship with them, even if it's a bit superficial. But I avoided those who were very hardcore about it, because it always went very wrong and got very poisonous quickly.
Yeah, so I'm kind of an observer of this culture from the outside. It doesn't really come into my life. Like, people in my life are not about the woke culture, so I'm just kind of observing it from the outside. And for me, it's hard to tell, like, who is genuinely, of that mindset and very vocal about it, because we always hear from the the people who are screaming the loudest. That's who we hear from, but it's hard to gauge what percentage of the population that actually is it maybe 10% of the people, but because they're screaming at the top of their lungs, we hear them, and another large percentage of the population goes along with it because it's expedient and easy, and they don't want to be the subject of the ire of the vocal screaming minority of people. Any ideas to, like, percentages you could apply to that? And I know it's not going to be exact, and there's no way of actually knowing this, but, like, just in your experience.
I really think as a vast majority are just doing it for the easy life and the virtue signaling. Because I can think back to my university experience, and there's only a couple where I got into real problems because it was so outrageous. So I think it's a very small minority, and I think also the trouble is a lot of that small minority feel very, very deeply. Their humanity has sort of been subverted in a way that they feel so deeply about this, really, in a wrong way, about something that they haven't, brought their thinking to bear on it. There's a kind of unbalance of rationality and truth with the depth of feeling that they feel. And it may be that, that, for example, they're right about they've experienced a truth in their lives about someone being sexist, because it always comes down to the individual experiences. They're only feeling deeply about that subject because they've gone through specific experiences. But the problem is they've extrapolated those feelings they haven't to something else, to this ideology, shall we say. They've given up their souls to the ideology. And so, yeah, what you find is, as I was saying before, you just can't really bridge the divide to them. You can't really fully understand them because I guess they don't understand themselves in a way.
Yeah. And I think that phenomenon is so you described a situation where it's a small minority of people screaming the loudest. They get the most attention, and a whole bunch of people go along to get along because
Mm,
they don't want to be the subject of this person's ire or whatever you want to call it. So if we take
exactly.
that about the woke culture, that sort of principle where it's the a small minority of people dictating how that culture evolves and grows, and then we
Mm,
sort of extrapolate that to the COVID narrative and all that stuff, you can kind of see how the agenda and the measures that are being taken are really only set and believed by a small minority of people. But then
mm,
so much of the rest of the population is just going along to get along. They don't have strong convictions one way or the other, but they go along because that's the easy path. That's the path
mm,
that'll get them in less trouble. They don't want to be made an example of. They don't want to stick out in any negative way, and they're just going to go along. And so I think that is, it's just a feature of the human condition that allows for this type of tyranny, this type of culture to take place. And so it's awesome to see people like you standing up against that and building something that can really push back and give people an alternative to the mainstream culture.
mm,
So could you talk about sort of where you want to take this in the future, building off of what you've done already, how you want to go ahead and take this into the future with growth of the organization, growth of the membership, and where you see it's headed.
mm. Yeah. So no, I very much resonate with what you said about um, people living just wanting to live the easy life, and that's the majority. Um, and I think that's probably what Youth for Freedom in the future would want to address, would want to be the solution for, if you like, um, that we those people come to see through sharing our um, research that they've been lied to, and on a very fundamental level as well. It's the lies are deeply personal because they are not just about kind of politics, as it were, which everyone, unfortunately, we have this awful thing in Britain where we just label all politicians as liars, and I think that's true, but it's like a passive stance. It's kind of like we just accept that. Um,
Yeah.
so, so that needs to stop, and we need to basically stand up for ourselves, I think. And so, Youth for Freedom gives young people an opportunity to do that. It seeks to kind of empower them. Um, but I think it's difficult speaking about exactly where it's going to go because it will depend on the world situation, and it will depend on what the individuals, as always, bring to Youth for Freedom. And my sort of initiative, as it were, is regarding truth, and that, as I said, I really want us to be able to research and find out the truth in all these matters, and not sit passively, kind of accepting that we can't know absolute truth, if you like. Um, I want us to be able to really get to the bottom of all these matters. But also, I feel we need to bring some sort of substance to Youth for Freedom. And so, for example, if we were to build a community, this idea of building a new world, or begin, collaborate with all the others. Which, by the way, you sort of asked, how's the Youth for Freedom going? Well, I think it's also relevant to say we kind of look to collaborate with a load of other organisations as well. So, like the Freedom Network, which is run by Karen, in both in Britain and actually worldwide, I believe. Um, they're doing a great job and at trying to help set up new communities, or give people the knowledge and possibility of setting up these new communities
Mm-hmm.
based on our own values rather than on the government's. So we want to collaborate with people like that, and I think my initiative would also would be to try and bring some substance to those communities, if you like, to bring this question of what can be the new basis for our social order, because I have my doubts that we can base it on something secular. I think it's a very challenging subject, but I think we need to go beyond that and approach the question of religion, if you like, the almighty question, which always, well, it's just like COVID. You have a direct split. But bring this question to actually how we to live in these communities, because we don't want to put all this effort into creating a new world which ends up being kind of just the same as the last, if you know what I mean. So we want to, in youth freedom, I think we want to go to the root of the issues and try and fully understand how we can actually create a better world. But obviously, I'm speaking out of mainly my initiatives that I'm bringing. I know that other members are each bringing something themselves, and that's the beauty of it, really. Because it's only in sort of collaborating in that way that we can have a kind of a full living initiative, if you like, that actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you like talking about like physical communities in you I don't know, buy a plot of land and you're all set up there, or what type of communities do you envision?
Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified that, because that word's sort of banded around, isn't it? And often not clarified. So yeah, I was thinking physical plots of land, and I'm sort of hoping that if enough people did this, where they bought a plot of land and got together with other people who were interested, and not just about sort of going off grid, but the idea of self-sufficiency, whereby that you don't necessarily have to rely on the utilities from the government, and therefore their laws and all that. And I would hope that we would be able to create something new from that. The difficulty I see is that this, again, what I said about common law. How do we actually get out of the system? Because if you create your own community, and you can do an amazing job, but if the government end up coming for you anyway, because if they have this so-called legal basis, then you're a bit screwed. So there's so many practical issues that we'd have to address.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't think you're alone in this. I think that there's many other groups out there, people out there who are trying to tackle these issues. So I don't think you're alone. And I think you mentioned, linking up with or collaborating with other people or groups similar to yours. And so I think that's a great idea. One person or one group probably won't be able to get to all the answers, but I think if it's sort of a joint effort led by many different people from all over the world, we can start to make sense of things and figure out models that will work into the future. And I think it's just that work towards that steady progress, and the fact that we kind of have a sense of urgency because we know what's going on, we know their plans, we know what's going on, and I think we have a rough idea of what we know what we don't want, and probably have a rough idea of what we do want. It's just going to take some work to get there. So it's great that you're taking steps in this direction.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, if we are to collaborate, do you envisage how we would come together collectively on a sort of larger scale without this issue of infiltration becoming very, very prominent?
Yeah, I mean, every movement's going to be infiltrated. In my opinion, I just think that a lot of things have to take place on the individual level. Like for me to start with is, my own self-reliance and personal responsibility. Like I'm doing what I can to grow my own food and produce my own energy. So I'm, a big garden, looking into solar right now, doing things in that vein, and trying to also build my community around me as well. And so, um, I think it's going to happen on the individual level. And when we can get together in groups, I think that's great. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict how exactly it'll all play out, but I think that if the mindset and drive is there, I think, humans are resourceful and problem solvers, and we will figure out a way to, sort of live in the world but not of their world. And I don't know how it's going to play out ultimately, but I do have faith and confidence that we will figure it out one way or the other.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's such a brilliant point of view as well, to start with personal responsibility, because surely that's where everything's gone wrong. We've stepped back um, from personal responsibility, but then also social responsibility stemming from that. We've said, politicians, you take care of my responsibilities for me, please let me have the easy life, and
Right.
um, they've ended up giving us hell. So I think that's brilliant to hear that you share the very similar perspective as me on that, and that gives me hope, definitely, because I can imagine if everyone did what you said, took personal responsibility first, we would have all these sort of, I imagine it as kind of cause communities where people really care for
Mhm.
each other, where they care for the truth, and so they're sort of taking an active role in, well, as you said, growing food, creating energy, and all that, so that it's not put on the government and people that we are not going to do, who are going to subvert, and who are going to not actually take care of those responsibilities, should we just say. Um, and if we have these kind of golden cores of true communities, then I can see that the government are going to start losing, aren't they? I say the government. I say the the corruption in the government, because I don't know if they're all bad people, but certainly this idea of the new world order is going to fall apart, because the people will have their voices heard, which is the main thing. I think
Yeah.
it's almost, we're trying to approach it from the positive way rather than bring down the government. We just get our voices heard, show what the world that we want to create by taking initiative in the way that you spoke of.
Yeah, and I think the solution is to just go and do it, and let the government do what they're going to do. I do think that um, it'll eventually fail, because I don't think that they have the infrastructure or the resources or the just ability to do what they're planning to do. Now, that doesn't mean that it'll completely fail for everybody, because I do think that people are going to opt into that system. But that gets to the point where it is an opt-in. It's an opt-in type of world where you have to opt into what they're doing. You have to
Mm,
roll up your sleeve. I
mm,
don't think that they came around, door to door. I know they didn't in the US. I'm pretty sure they didn't go door to door knocking on people's doors and telling people to roll up their sleeves. In the UK, it was something that you had to do because you were either fearful or dependent on whatever it is you were dependent on, and so you felt like you didn't have a choice. And so, the less you can be dependent on things that society slash the government provide, the more freedom you have to live the life that you want to live. And so I think it just starts on the individual level to take that responsibility for providing what you need in your life. I mean, that's how it used to be. I mean, used to go off, get a plot of land, and build a house and build a life. And you know and so we have a lot more resources available to ourselves right now. And so theoretically it should be easier.
mm. Yeah, definitely, and yeah, with the technology that we have, for sure, and that what you just said sort of, it's made me kind of understand why my dad would have a romantic view of the good old days, so to
Right.
say, um,
Yeah.
because of this living off the land. But I think now, as you say, we actually have an opportunity potentially for, for doing that again, but with the technology, with a better quality of life, you could say.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we do nevertheless need to sort of prepare for the worst in the sense of we know what past regimes of which have turned to authoritarianism, turned authoritarian, what those regimes have done. And I mean, my knowledge on that isn't very deep, but I've certainly heard some people speak on it, and they are very worried about what's happening. So I think I agree with you that the solution, first and foremost, is that positive, constructive action. But then I think we need to consider that we need to be ready for the worst as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that's a good place to plug your organization again, because being ready for the worst means that you are connected and joined together with other people, because other people are going to make your life easier, and more enjoyable. And so connect with Youth for Freedom. We put a link in the chat. It's youthforfreedom.co.uk. So join that, donate to that, see if there's a chapter that you want to start in your own local area. And these are happening all over the world. So this is just yet another example of what Jesse and I talk about on the show all the time. The new world is being built. You have an example right here of someone, you're 23 years old. You decided to take initiative and do something because you didn't want to see society crumbling anymore. You wanted to see a new and better world. And I think with people like you and many, many others, this new world is being built, and we can see examples all around the world. So I'll let you have the last word, and it's been great chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you, Asher. No, I think that's a great place to end it. Yeah, definitely coming together, because if we truly care for our friends and family, and we are taking personal responsibility as well, there's really nothing that this new world order can impose on us. And that's been shown through inspirational stories in the past. I think that's part of what art's about, expressing those stories about how people stood up to tyranny. And I think we need to hold that in our hearts, I feel. And I just really look forward to meeting any new young people who are feeling the way I am and passionate to create this new world. And thank you so much for this opportunity, Asher.
Awesome. So yes, thanks, Rhys, for joining me today. Go to youthforfreedom.co.uk to learn more about Rhys and his organization. And it's been great chatting with you, and we'll have to do it again sometime soon.